Namaste. Hi there. Welcome to our next My Health World podcast. It's Greg here, and I'm excited to have two really, really special guests joining us for today's My Health World podcast episode. We have up the top of the screen, you'll see beautiful Lonnie joining us from Canada. Hi, Lonnie.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And those of you who have studied with us at My Health before, you will recognize the glorious Lou as well. So thank you for joining us, Lou.
Hello.
Hi there. So today we are going to be chatting about sacred birth. What does it mean? How does this relate to those of you who are healers, yoga teachers? Maybe you're studying yoga, or perhaps you're watching this and you are pregnant, you're looking for some more information. This is something I was just chatting to Lonnie and Lou. I was just chatting to what my place is. Obviously, I'm the host of this podcast. But as a male in this type of arena or in this world of birthing, it's something which I actually feel really comfortable in. I'm here in my clinic at the moment, and I work a lot with females, with women, with ladies. I work with younger women who are looking at natural ways of regulating their cycle, natural ways of working with their menstrual cycle, natural ways of aligning with the moon as well in preparation for pregnancy. I then work with ladies during pregnancy and, of course, work during birth and postpartum as well. So it's something that I'm really comfortable talking about. I was raised with a very open mum and a very open sister. And I was just sharing with Lou and Lonnie as well that this is something which I think men need to feel comfortable talking about as well. Birth is something which is exclusive to cisgendered females. However, it's also something which needs to be an open discussion. So it's not a taboo subject. It's not something which we just talk about secretly on the side. It's a beautiful process of life. And I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion today. So I'm only here to host today. I'm so excited to see where this discussion goes. For those of you who are joining us live, feel free to ask any comments you like whilst we have these two incredible women here with us today. I'm going to start with Lonnie. So Lonnie, can you just give us a little bit of an introduction for us here at My Health Yoga as to who you are, where you are at the moment? So obviously you're in Canada, but what things are like over there for you, and how you come into this world. So how long you've been in this world of sacred birthing.
Okay. So I'm in Canada, and that's why it's hence dark here. And the moon will be coming up soon, so you might see me gazing over there. But yeah, so Lonnie Gustafson. And so since I first became pregnant about 20 years ago now, that's when the passion of birth just came on really strong. I've ebbed and flowed out of the idea of becoming a midwife, but it just never really resonated with me in the way that midwives are these days. There's a place for them, absolutely. But once they became registered, they had to follow certain protocols, and that just didn't feel in alignment with me. I like the idea of a traditional birth attendant. So, just being with the woman, observing the woman, helping her, when she needs it, but intuitively is what it comes down to for me. So my own personal journey is that I have 4 children. My first birth was, like I said, almost 20 years ago. I just intuitively knew how to prepare my body for birth. And I had this feeling that I wanted to just go out into the forest where I lived and just give birth by myself under a tree or something. But then, of course, because it's like, no, you're just being silly, just kind of went against and suppressed that innate feeling. So I ended up birthing at a friend's house and had a midwife come just before I was pushing. So it was a wonderful, great first birth. And I know I'm very fortunate for that, because a lot of women's first births can be quite traumatic because they don't know what they're getting into. And the kind of care that's out there these days can be better, is what I'm trying to say. My remaining 3 births, I did go with my instincts this time. And I just birthed at home all by myself. Well, of course, whatever family members were there at the time. As the children grew, they were around for, the subsequent births. So it's called a free birth, unassisted birthing. So I do like to support women mostly in that route. So, virtually, by the phone, in person. However, if that's something that they desire, I can, help them along with whatever they desire for their birth outcome, really. Even if they choose a hospital, I can still help. I just wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't choose to go and attend any births in a hospital because I don't think that I could offer what I could offer out of hospital for women. So anyways, that is what I do. I just love birth, just so passionate about it. It's such an amazing, transforming thing for women that I just don't want to see you miss out on. Like, I see so many women and hear their stories. They're so disempowering and so traumatic, and it doesn't have to be that way. If they only knew the power that they have to be able to birth and the power they will get for the rest of their life, it'll just resonate throughout their entire lives. It'll help with their parenting, with their connecting with their children, and just with the outward world. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's been kind of suppressed and taken away from us. And birth has been stolen and turned it into something kind of scary. So that's what I do. And I know Louise probably does similar things to just bring birth back to the women, because it's not something that needs to be fear-based. So thank you.
Wow. So Lonnie, I've got to go back over something you said right at the start of that, because for you to take that leap of faith and just trust your intuition and say, I was called into the forest, basically, I just felt that this is something I had to do. One thing I hear this from hypnobirthing instructors and doulas and holistic birth coaches who I work alongside is that there is a lot of fear associated with birth. And as again, cisgendered male, this is not something which I will ever completely understand. But if I try to look at the energy behind that, I can, of course, understand that birth will always have a little bit of fear associated with it, as anything miraculous does. However, how is it that you were able to just swallow that fear and block out all of the scary narrative from probably hospitals and your family members and your friends who thought you were nuts or whatever it was, and say, stuff it, I'm going to trust my intuition and do what I know is right for me? Because I think first and foremost, that must be one of the most challenging things for someone to do, is to say, I'm going to actually go against, the white coat, what the white coat says, this is what you've got to do.
Yeah.
So was there a definitive moment? Or I guess what I'm asking is, were you always a bit of a defiant woman? Are you someone who it's your star sign, it's who you are, you just feel called to go your own way? Or is this a bit of an aha moment and you said, you were called to do it?
Maybe a little bit of all of that, actually, Greg. Going against the grain, but not intentionally. It's just following your intuition. So I'm not trying to be defiant. I'm just trying to honor myself. And all it takes is going within. All it takes is going within and surrendering to a higher source and to self, and trusting things like your body. We were made perfectly to birth. So it's just, putting this like imaginary shield around you. I had to do several times when there is people or family members who come in with their own fears, and just stay strong, knowing that they're not my fears, so they can just rebound off of me. Like, I just would visualize other people's fears and just rebounding off of me, literally, and not penetrating into me and my experience and what I knew was best for me and how I trusted my instincts and my body. And it always worked out. And people say, well, what if this would have happened, or what if that would have happened, or whatever? Well, then my intuition would have told me something was wrong. Like, it's all about going within and relying on your instincts about anything, birth or anything. So I would have felt something might have needed some attention or maybe some assistance. And I wouldn't have resisted that and been, oh, no. It's about listening and flowing and going with that flow of your instincts. They're always talking to you. You got to just trust that. So I hope that helps answer your question, Greg.
Oh, I've got both my hands up to you, saying you're a true Wonder Woman. I can't wait to get into your story a little bit more and to hear from you, of course, Lou. But wow, already we're only 10 minutes into this and I'm already flabbergasted with absolute admiration. So unpacking all of that, it seems that the common theme for everything going on in the world at the moment is we're being told to disconnect from our intuition. We know that the intuition is what connects us with higher levels of consciousness. It lets us flow in our true path. And I've heard, as we all have, we've all heard the stories about the mother's intuition. You know, I took my child to hospital, they sent me home, they kept sending me home, but then of course there was something going on. And whilst there have also equally been stories where hospital has saved lives, and we always want to acknowledge the incredible work that our frontline healthcare workers do in the correct time. This is a very specific time for a woman, and I think I'm going to pass it over to you, Lou, because I know that Lonnie has already chatted a little bit about the difference between being a midwife and being, for example, a holistic birth coach or a doula. I have, this year alone, I've had 2 patients and 1 friend already drop out of midwifery school here just in the Gold Coast alone. So that's 2 patients that were enrolled, both of them at the same university. And a really good friend of mine who's a fellow acupuncturist drop out because of the absolute insane measures. There's no other word that they are being told that they have to do as part of that. And I know, Lonnie, you were talking about the regulations. It's the same with acupuncture. We, as acupuncturists in Australia, we're under a whole heap of regulations. And whilst they seem to be beneficial at the start, once you start nodding to higher powers, pretty quickly you realize that your hands are tied under the table. So what for you, Lou, let's go back to your story as well, with your child and your birthing experience. But is there anything that you can shed light on for those people listening? What's the difference between a midwife and what would lead someone down that road as opposed to going with either a doula, a holistic birth coach, sacred birth coach, or something like that?
Okay. That's a lot to unpack. So in Australia, we have pretty limited models of care. I think it's something like 3% of women actually are able to utilize like continuity of care. So that means they have the same midwife with them throughout their whole pregnancy. That midwife will be at the birth, whether that be in a hospital setting, which it usually is, or if that midwife will facilitate a home birth. Most women will just go into the system in the like regular labor wards, which is basically like playing a game of Russian roulette with your experience. So as soon as you step into that hospital when you're in labor, you're on the clock. You're, working against the system that comes in. If you haven't done this within a certain time frame, then this intervention is going to be, you're going to be coerced into doing that. And that sounds really scary. And I don't mean to, scare anyone that might be watching that's pregnant, but I think there needs to be more awareness about the types of care that you can utilize, right? So a doula or like a birth keeper, they might work with hospital births. They might work to support women that are free birthing, like Lonnie. Oh my gosh, your story is just so inspiring. They might work to support a woman who wants to birth unassisted. There's also the private model of care, which usually you're working with an obstetrician, which tends to be that your experience is going to be scheduled. You may be pressured into certain interventions, and you're not given enough information as well. And that's the thing that really kind of gets me riled up, is that there's just been a study come out of the UK on the short and long-term effects of birth interventions on babies. So things like an instrumental birth, so that's like if baby is delivered with the use of vacuum or forceps. The studies have shown there are massive rates of jaundice in babies. In terms of like baby's microbiome, if baby is delivered like surgically, so it's not a vaginal birth, then that can have implications down the track. So, I mean, some of these interventions are life-saving and they're needed, but it shouldn't be just served out with not enough information, not enough discussion about the long-term effects. Usually it's just a lot of scaremongering in the system. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And so many women, especially first-time mums, they just have no idea about this. They go to their GP, they, get into the hospital system, and they aren't told about these other options, or they aren't told about the different types of support that they can utilize. So yeah, it's interesting and quite scary.
I know in Australia there is so much pressure on women, and again, this is coming directly from my clinic. I see hundreds of pregnant women each and every year. There is so much pressure on women to just do what they're told and not to speak up. And this is something which it troubles me as an energy worker, as an acupuncturist, as a healer, and just as a human being, it troubles me. Anytime that you're being told by someone that they don't have time to listen to your concerns and your questions, I think that alone is a huge red flag. For you in Canada, Lonnie, what is the situation like? Is this similar to, I know Canada and Australia have a lot of similarities. I've been to Canada a couple of times. I absolutely love Canadians, and we always get along and have a good time. So what's things like in terms of the birth arena there? Is it something which it's quite divisive and you're often being told, no, you should just stick with the mainstream and do what the doctors say? Or is there a movement, as there is here in Australia, leading towards calling for more holistic birth coaches and birth practitioners?
Yeah, I think it's been growing over the years for sure. I think people are just going in that direction, just with all things in life anyway, so birth included. Just like anything, it takes time to make changes in the world and in our systems. But still, the rates are just still way too high. I still personally believe that birth does not belong in a hospital. That's just my personal beliefs. But when you're pregnant and expecting a baby and giving birth, you are the healthiest that you will ever be in your whole entire life. So being in a hospital is the last place you want to be. Like Louise was saying, as soon as you step foot in a hospital, your power, got to leave it at the door. Check it into that taking your power place and just go on in. But I think what's been happening more and more now is that women maybe are, using doulas to try and be their voice for them if they do choose to be in a hospital. Because when you're in the moment of giving birth, especially if it's your first time, you don't know what to expect. And you're scared, and you have all these strangers around you and all these things going on and lights, and you don't know what's going on, and they're poking and prodding you, and trying to get your consent for this and that, or talking about this, and they're talking about fear, and it's just, I can't even imagine being in that environment. But anyways, people are, so it's good to have either a doula or have your husband or your partner be armed with education and information about what to expect if you do step foot in a hospital, what choices you have. Can you decline this? What does this even mean? Know everything that you can know so that you are armed and guarded when you go in there, and have someone to advocate for you if you can't advocate for yourself. So here in Canada, the rates are just still way too high for cesareans and for interventions. That's all I can say. For real emergencies, like, come on, let's just save it for real emergencies in birth, which is very, 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 very rare. But of course, they're going to happen. But there is a time and a place for those interventions, but not with every single birth, not with such a high majority of births. So let's just, let's just transition, get birth out of the hospital, whether it's a birth center, whatever, something that's just more birth friendly. The home, of course, is my personal choice, because that's where you're most comfortable. That's where you're most familiar. That's where you're going to let go a lot more easier, because everything is just right there. It's your familiarity place. That's where you prepared your whole body and your spirit and your mind the whole entire pregnancy. So why wouldn't you stay there and continue on with the next phase? And then that's where you're going to be in the further phase by having the child and being with the child and raising the child and connecting with the child. So it just makes sense to kind of not interrupt that cycle of just being at home. But of course, there are wonderful, caregivers who will come to your home, right? Like I know midwives do, and doulas will come to your home. There is even some doctors that might come to the home if a person has, a really great doctor that they love and that's in alignment with, their needs and their desires, and that's awesome too. It's all just personal preference. But yeah, we definitely do need to get birth out of the hospital.
Yes.
We certainly do. So Jacqueline has just written, it's frustrating she wasn't allowed to try natural for her third birth as she had 2 C-sections before. This is something which I get asked a lot in this clinic, and I obviously direct people to both evidence-based research and also other sources of information other than what you're going to get just at a hospital. I gently and lovingly remind patients continually, particularly those who are working with private hospitals, but even more and more government hospitals here in Queensland, that they are run more and more like businesses. So just like any business, they need people coming in and coming out on a schedule. That's of course not to say that C-sections don't have their place. However, it's the intention behind it. Is it something which is done because of convenience, or is it something which is done because of the risks? And I get alarmed when I hear people talking about the risk of this or the risk of that, because it just becomes hearsay unless you actually have some kind of evidence that you can show. And you know, you're not walking into your doctor's appointment and they're handing out all this amazing information. They're just telling you exactly what you've got to do. In terms of cesareans versus vaginal births, I'll open this up to either of you, Lou or Lonnie. What is your experience? I don't want to say opinion, but what's your experience? What are the statistics of someone trying a natural birth, what we call a VBAC, so a natural birth after a vaginal birth, or even after, or the opposite of that?
Yeah, well, I've supported quite a few women who had a cesarean for their first birthing experience, and it was traumatic for them. And a lot of the time, this is so common because they go into the system, first time mum, they don't have the knowledge, they don't know their rights. So through the system, they just kind of intervention after intervention, which ends in an emergency C-section. And so when they get pregnant again, they look for different options. So I've been doula for a couple of ladies who were going for a VBAC for their second birth. And a lot of the work that we do during pregnancy is working through that trauma of the first experience, because the body holds on to that, as we know, as energy workers, birth trauma especially, it just stays in the body. And anything emotional that you haven't dealt with throughout the pregnancy, it's going to come up in labor. Like that is it. And these women that I supported, we did so much work, or they did so much of that inner work. And all of them had amazing healing VBACs for their second birth, which is amazing to witness. But it really frustrates me, because that first experience for them being so traumatic and so clinical, it didn't need to happen. Like so many times, it's just something like, oh, failure to progress. And it's like, how do you gauge failure? You know, you're on a clock in the hospital setting. So if you're not dilating 1 centimeter per hour, then you're not, on their schedule. Every woman is different. Every birth is different. How can you, try and put us into these little boxes or on a checklist? So it's really frustrating to see. And a lot of the time, those experiences are caused by induction, and that's when the body is pushed into going into labor with the synthetic hormones when it's not ready. Baby's not ready, body's not ready. So no wonder you come up against these obstacles, because your body's just going, hey, I'm not ready to do this. You're pumping me full of this synthetic stuff that's going to cause these insane contractions. You haven't had your warm up. So it's just like this cascade that the system does set women up for failure. It's really, really frustrating.
When you say, as a doula, when you say you support women through going through the, let's say, transforming those emotions at a metaphysical level that was stuck, what exactly do you do if someone wants to come and see a doula? Is it breathing techniques? Is it journaling? Is it chanting? Is it some kind of physical work? What do you do, Lou, just out of interest that you find
all
can
of the
really
things?
Help? Yeah, all of the things. Okay.
Yeah, everything. It depends on the woman and what she's open to. Obviously, as a yoga teacher, I'm really into, doing the body work. So, a lot of yin, Reiki, again, like whatever she resonates with. It might be doing like a creative, like art therapy type thing. It may be more hands-on, like massage. She might be journaling it through. Whatever she needs to do or whatever she's called to do to work through that. We can also do something that's kind of like reclaiming her first birth. So working through that trauma by actually through meditation, through, getting in the water, maybe setting up like a bath, and getting her to sort of travel back into that experience and heal that, or bring to the surface that energetic, the feelings that she experienced. And it's like, it's full on, but it's bringing it out, because a lot of the time we just shove down these experiences, these feelings. So it's bringing it out, like facing it head on, and then understanding, why it happened. And most of the time it's not the woman. She didn't do anything wrong. She was amazing. It's like she's trying to birth in this system that does not support her, that, there's bullying, there's fear-mongering. So, of course, her body's going to shut down and go into that, fight, flight, freeze. And her body is not going to progress because she feels unsafe. So it's like letting the woman know that she's not broken, her body's not broken. The system that she was trying to birth in, that's the broken part. So revisiting that and working,
And we come from a generation or a couple of generations now where I know from my mum and I have talked a lot about my birth, because my birth was an interesting one. They used the forceps, the vacuum, everything to try and, get me out. And it caused quite a lot of trauma for my mum, but also for me. So I had, as a little boy, real problems sleeping. I used to have continual nightmares where it's amazing now, because I can actually go back metaphysically and I can recognize now that it was the birth canal, but it was almost like I would be asleep and I would see from this black space, I would see light, and all of a sudden hands reach in and grab me and pull me. And every time that happened, my lungs would go like that, and I would wake up. When I was really little, wow, it would cause me to wet the bed. And then as I got older, I used to, and I wasn't raised religious, but I used to pray as a young child that I could have one night without this nightmare. It was horrendous. And the interesting thing is, the only time it ever stopped, my poor mother, the only time it ever stopped is if I crawled into her room and slept in her bed. It was this massive, so, lucky me, when I was a teenager and fell into yoga and learned about metaphysics, it was actually not that difficult for me to go back into that emotion, reset it and connect. And it was something that I was able to clear, and I now absolutely love sleep. I have no issues with darkness. I have no nightmares at all. So it's something which it does affect men just as much as women, because, we're giving birth to both genders, and we have to acknowledge that this is an experience, hi little one, this is an experience which is going to affect so many people. But as I was saying, a lot of what we learn about births, at least my mother's generation and my generation, came from movies. We're watching these women getting thrown in an ambulance and, she's got to make it. Will she make it to hospital on time? And I've got to rush to hospital, as if you don't make it to hospital, something's go wrong. And then when you're in hospital, then it's the screaming. You've got your legs up in stirrups and it's your screaming and swearing and horrendous. I give credit to my sister, who went through our teacher training course and then studied to be a hypnobirthing instructor. And my sister's first birth was a water birth, and I was living overseas, so I wasn't able to be there as a birthing partner, which is what I wanted. But I've watched it because she videotaped it, and I've watched it a few times, and she's chanting, she's breathing. It is the most relaxing, beautiful birth. So that, to me, I said, oh, Hollywood's been lying. However, I want to ask this to you, Lonnie. If something does go wrong, and I don't like to use the black and whites, but let's say that a medical intervention is required. What I hear all the time is two things. One, that the mum feels a lot of guilt. Why did I try and do it this way? The doctors were telling me not to do it. And, maybe I'm the one that got it wrong. And maybe I shouldn't have listened to the doula. I shouldn't have listened to the hypnobirthing coach. And they get a lot of guilt. And secondly, if you're coaching someone through the birthing experience, do you go through any safety or any backup procedures? Is there something that you say, it's good if you're close to a hospital, or is it you rely on your intuition so much that she's not going to need it? Big question. So again, a lot to unpack.
Yeah, no, it's okay. What it comes down to, it's quite simple, actually.
Cool.
Okay, love you. They're just going to bed. See, it's late here for me, and I almost was
It is late.
I was 2 hours early. Did you? Wow. In Australia, so they're far away. Yes.
Hi.
All right.
G'day.
So what it comes down to is responsibility. It's about taking responsibility and encouraging the women and the fathers and just the families or whatever to take responsibility, just like you would with anything in your life. We should all be taking responsibility instead of unloading it on things that are outside of us, things that are external, and putting blame on all these things that don't matter, don't exist. It's just a place to put blame, because that doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve anybody in the world, doesn't serve the world. But if we take responsibility for our choices in life, we take responsibility for our bodies, for our minds, for everything that we do in this world. That is what people need to start doing again, is reclaiming, themselves. And again, going within, trusting their instincts, their intuition. Okay. So, I'm going to recommend books or whatever, but I'm never going to do anything for anybody. I'm going to be there to listen, because like Louise was saying about the traumas that have happened in past births for women, I find just listening is just so essential, because they were never really heard to begin with, probably during the trauma that they experienced during the birth. And then afterwards, everybody's just doting on the baby and going, oh, but at least you're fine and the baby's fine. It's like, oh, wait, what about the woman? She just went through the most traumatic, stupidest thing in the whole entire world. And she's not going to be able to process it, because now all the focus is on the baby and all that excitement. And she's trying to heal her body now. And this traumatic thing, like you said, leaving an imprint on your body for life. And it will affect future births. It will affect your relationships, probably with your husband, with that child. Like, we have to let our women heal after they've been through that trauma. So postpartum doulas and things come in really handy if they're trained well to do that. But that being said, there's good book. It's just about taking responsibility, encouraging them to go and do some research, learn those little skills that your husband might have a couple fears about birthing at home, for example, whatever. Well, then go and research it, or go get a little bit of training so that you feel confident and you can take responsibility for whatever happens. Make your plans between the two of you, whatever's going to feel right for you guys, so that no matter what happens, you can feel empowered by what happened. Every choice was yours. And you have to take responsibility for it, no matter how it goes. We've got to end this putting blame on things outside of us and people outside of us. So does that answer your question?
Honestly, I would clap. I would stop and clap. I absolutely agree. This is just coming through now as I listen to both of you with your incredible stories and wisdom and knowledge. But the vibration of taking responsibility, trusting your intuition, this is something which you've got to think that this is how we used to live. Hey, like, you've got to think that we've almost been fooled into thinking that we've got all of the modern technology and things have never been so safe. So it's an interesting scenario. Every human being that exists on the planet in the 3D world has been born. We have been birthed, whether that's through cesarean, whether that's adoption, whether that was a traumatic birth or a beautiful birth. We all come from that experience. And so this is really where, and again, this is in the 3D, but it's still important. This is really where a lot of our emotional embodiment, this is where our emotional lineage will actually come from. The germ cells, it comes from paternal, it comes from maternal, and we're an embodiment of exactly what we express. So when we're shifting birth trauma, we're actually shifting planetary trauma. We're actually making a difference to the collective consciousness, to the vibration of the world. So I wonder if either of you have any information on this, because when I was thinking about this podcast and I was thinking, what questions would I have if I was watching this? I read things, I don't want to say in the news because I don't, but I read, different reports and research and articles that discuss birth trauma, stillbirths, problematic births in developing nations, all right? So countries which don't have Western hospitals, which don't have access to the facilities that we have. So are they wrong? Are they right? do either of you know what's happening in countries where, or not even in countries, so, you know, it could be happening in areas of Australia, areas of Canada where they're living more off-grid. What are the statistics? Do the statistics support that? Or are they being manipulated to try and push the agenda of the hospitals a little bit more?
Are you saying these are women that are birthing at home?
Well, birthing at home, or like, so for example, if you were living in a remote, let's say African village, okay, or you're living in, I traveled through different areas of Morocco, different areas of Egypt, and there were areas where hospitals were just not, they were not available, or they were a long, long distance away. Even once I was injured while I was in the Caribbean, and I had to go 2 hours to go to a hospital. And when I went there, the hospital didn't have electricity. So they had to ship me somewhere else to try and get an MRI. You know, things like this happening. So it could only be assumed that in populations like that, they're home birthing, because they don't have the birthing center. They don't have the facilities that we have in these countries. So do the statistics show that they're more likely to have problems, or that it's more successful because they're going with a more home birth situation or a natural birth situation?
Are you saying that the mortality rates in those countries are?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's what I'm asking. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think definitely in Australia, like even though home births are like a lower statistic comparatively, it's a lot safer to birth at home. The rates of interventions, the risk of postpartum hemorrhage, it's all lower because it's more of a community-based thing. You're in your home. You're surrounded by the people that love and support you. So that's going to support the flow of labor, oxytocin, all the hormones, which is going to allow birth to progress. When you're in a hospital setting, you know, you go to the hospital when you're sick. So why would you want to go there to birth your baby? Even though I birthed in a hospital. I had a great experience, but I basically just went to the hospital to push the baby out. And once he was out, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'll go home now. So, you know, but in the hospital setting, it's cold, it's clinical, there's bright lights, there's strangers. So of course, a woman's going to feel unsafe. It's like exactly like you see animals in nature. They go and hide to give birth. They go somewhere warm and dark and away from people because that's safety, right? When you're at home, it's a community thing. You know the midwives, if you're going to have an attending midwife, you've created a relationship with them, or your birth keeper or your doula. You know, you've got friends there maybe, you've got family, you've got your children. So it's just this big love bubble. So, you know, it's just going to flow, like just the vibration, the energy of a home birth. It's so different. It's like relaxed. People are giggling. People are making cups of tea. We're playing with the kids. It's just like, it's a natural process. Like birth is not a medical emergency, right? We don't have to.
I love that. I love that. That's a quote. Birth is not a medical emergency. Yeah, I haven't heard that. I love that.
Somebody, I don't know, it's not my quote, but it's like,
that's okay.
It's like, I'd love to take it, it's great, but it's you know, birth it's a natural process. And when we birth, you know, surrounded by the things, the people that love and support us, it's easy, you know. It's still a challenging experience, but yeah.
Look, if anyone watching this, whether you're watching live now or you're watching later, if you know any interesting documentaries or anything written about what it's like in different cultures around the world who perhaps aren't built around the pharma medical kind of society and what birth is like, please feel free to pop some links, because I would find it really fascinating. It's something which I haven't learned a lot about myself. I've studied what marriage means in different cultures around the world. I've studied, I've got relatives that work in different camps around the world for anything from vaccination clinics to eye clinics and things like that. But birthing would be a really interesting subject to look at, different cultures and what it means for them. But also, why is it that us living here up in our beautiful mansions in the Western world, we're the happiest people in the world. That's why we're all on antidepressants, isn't it? But why is it that we rely so much on a hospital for the natural process of birth? So as we move into 2021, there is a vibration of fear which many people are exposed to. And this is something which yoga teachers, healers, energy workers are working quite well to combat against, to bring everyone back to a state of connection, love, and to make us feel that we are living in a world with hope and with a good prospect for the future. I can only imagine what it would be like I can only imagine myself, but I've heard women actually say it to me in this clinic. I can't believe that I'm pregnant at the moment, or I've got a little one, and what that means for them moving into the future. So do you, as mothers, do you have any advice for someone listening to this thinking, hang on, the world looks like it's darker than ever before. We're being controlled by the hospitals, controlled by the governments. What's it like for you as women who are advocates for natural birth and sacred birth? Does that flow on into the rest of your life? Are you building relationships with your children that help them to feel loved and connected? And is that something that you think is related to sacred birthing? Is that something which is holistic in the way that you live? And what do you think about what's happening at the moment? Is there a vibration of fear that's taking over, or are we heading towards utopia? Big question again.
Well, yeah, it does definitely spill over. I would imagine. If you're taking responsibility for your own self and using your instincts for birth, right, then it would make sense that it spills over and you start intuitive parenting. So you're parenting with your instincts and letting the children kind of guide the way, and just surrendering, I guess, and is another process as in birth. Instead of being told again how we're supposed to be parenting and like, oh, this and all those things that don't feel right to us, but we're doing it anyways, okay? It was instinctual for me. I didn't have to do any research about circumcision or vaccinations. I just instinctually knew it wasn't for me. No research necessary. I've only been researching vaccines now at this current time because it's just so prevalent in our faces now. But yeah, and the attachment parenting philosophy, if everybody knows that term or not, but it's just again letting the child lead. So extended breastfeeding, feeding on demand, when they're needing to be fed, letting them sleep with you for as long as they need to. They're not being manipulative. We're told that our children are being manipulative when they're 2 or whatever, because they're whatever. It's like, no, my gosh, children are the most pure thing in this world. So then it can spill over again into when they're growing up. And if you choose to homeschool, I like to reference unschooling, that kind of child-led learning philosophy. Again, you're just kind of following their lead. You're there for them to be guiding them and supporting them with their passions and things, not trying to enforce, no, this is what you need to learn. No, sit down, this is what we need to learn right now. It's like letting them be interested in something, and then finding stuff and showing it to them and bringing it to them. And it's just a beautiful thing. It's a natural thing, and it feels so much better than going against and butting heads with anybody, your children included, right? Like, and if you have to keep it to yourself, those philosophies, any of these philosophies we're talking about, that's okay. Just protect yourself, protect and honor yourself and your own beliefs. And it doesn't matter what anybody says, even if it's family and stuff. They're not you. They just might not know any better to what you're trying to express and be in the world, and that's okay. That's their journey. But it's completely okay to separate yourself from people that just might not understand you in the moment and might be trying to attack on some kind of subconscious or unconscious level, and they just don't know better. They might not even be doing it intentionally, but you have every right to protect yourself from anyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you keep coming back to your intuition and your channel. There's so many people, and talking about everything that's happening in the world at the moment. There's so much research. There's research for this, there's research for that. There's so much available on the internet that I'm pretty sure any argument you present to me, if I have my own agenda, I could find research that supports A, and I have research that supports left.
Yeah.
But I wonder what it's going to take for us just to come back to, I don't want to say common sense because it's not very common, but to come back to our channel, to come back to our heart and our intuition, and to say, I honor your choices and I honor your experience, but I don't need to I don't research. I don't need to ask everyone else's opinion. And we are born on Mother Earth. We are creatures of Mother Earth. We have a divine feminine energy, whether we're male or whether we're female. And part of that femininity, as yoga teachers, we learn is our connection to our intuition. It's quite a yin thing. It's quite a yin nature. It's a female instinct. It's a female intuition. The yang energy, the masculine energy wants to go around and confront everything and be very, explosive and controlling. And that's not a negative thing. That's important to have. But female energy, like you said, Lou, when it's at its core, when it's in its beautiful element, it is so nurturing, nourishing, intuitive, and wise. And I know that because I have some incredible women in my life and some incredible patients who come in here, some incredible women who I work with at My Health Yoga as well. So perhaps as well, working with, and you can answer this if you like, Lou, but working with women who are pregnant, who are going through a birthing journey at the moment, there must be so much involved with unprogramming the need to constantly just read another book and read another book and read another book. Yes, it's important to be informed. So it does seem a little bit like a hypocritical kind of paradox, doesn't it? You say, well, you want to be informed, but you don't need to be. It's almost like you just want to quieten the part of the mind that's asking for all the logic. And, if that means you need to pick up a book and read it, that's cool. Lonnie, you made a great point, and I hear this a lot. You do want to have some information because as much as you can trust your channel, you can trust your intuition. When the doctor is saying, oh, hang on, you're nearly at 42 weeks, so the risk is a lot higher. You can say, well, that's a rough estimate based on this, and those statistics aren't actually correct. And currently, this is what I would like to do, because if we don't start with, let's go back to a balloon catheter, or let's go back to a stretch and sweep before we go into the synthetic. So, just having a little bit of understanding in your head, it means that you've got a retaliation. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you're reading a book to get the knowledge. You've got the intuition. So do you agree with that, Lou?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think one of the biggest things that always comes up in pregnancy is the letting go of control, because it's this energy of Mother Nature that is, we are the channel. And however much you try to plan, to read all the books, do all the things, birth is going to happen in the way that's best for you and your baby, but it might not be like you envisioned. So that act of surrender and letting go of control and trust is paramount. And that's why, obviously I teach yoga, and for me, that was like one of the highest sort of spiritual awakenings that I had during pregnancy and birth, was connecting to me. And yoga was a beautiful vehicle for that, because in yoga, it's all about the breath, going inward, letting go of external distractions, etc. So it's getting to know yourself on that deeper level, and then experiencing an empowered birth. Basically, it's the most powerful thing that you can experience physically, emotionally, spiritually. And then you realize how powerful you are, and you start to realize, hey, I don't really care what this person thinks, because I'm in my power. I know what's right for me and my family, my baby. So yeah, it's an incredible spiritual experience, that's for sure.
So, all right. So as we come towards the end, it's already been this chat has already taught me so much, and I know everyone watching this video is going to be thinking, "Wow, I'm going to have to watch that again because there's so much information." Is there anything in specific that if someone's listening to this and they feel a bit lost, or they feel like they're unsure if they're going the right way, is there anything in particular that you can recommend as rituals or tools that they can do on a daily basis, whether or not they're already pregnant or they're looking to get pregnant, or maybe they're preparing for their birth, in their third trimester? Is there anything that they can do, perhaps if they don't have the either finances, if they don't have the ability, if they don't have the connections to work with a doula or a holistic birth coach, say that they're already locked into this schedule and that's something that for whatever reason they've got to do. Is there a way to offset that? Is there something that they can do? So is there any specific takeaways that you can give to someone to actually make their experience a more holistic, more pleasant, and more transformational experience, whether it be words or whether it be actual tools that you can impart? Is there a podcast that you recommend? Is it journaling? Is it chanting? Is it listening to your body? Is it talking to your baby? All of those.
Well, yeah, it's all of those, Greg. Every single one of those, and whatever feels right for the woman. But definitely, just starting to go within if a person hasn't already, and just start brainstorming. What is your desired birth outcome? What would you
I
desire?
like that.
What would you like to see as the birth? What is that vision? And write it down. Read it every day if you have to. Draw it, speak it. Talk about it. Don't watch any negative birth stories. And if someone is trying to tell you their traumatic birth story while you are pregnant, you have the right again to la la la, just walk away. You don't need to listen. Okay. Surround yourself with positive birth stories. There's so many. There's enough, right? Positive stories and videos. You can watch mine on my YouTube channel. I posted one of my births that we actually recorded. It's pretty cool. Yes, but having that vision and just working towards it. Okay, so what would it take? It's like having any vision or goal. Now going backwards, what's it going to take to reach that goal? And who are you going to involve in that? There's so much to it. How are you going to deal with the fears that come up around you that are not yours? How are you going to stabilize yourself so that they don't penetrate and become your fears as well? So it's just lots of inner work, quieting the mind, spending time with yourself. Like I said, if you have to remove yourself for that 9 months from certain people, then just do it. It's fine. This is your life. Don't ever feel responsible for somebody else outside of you, okay? So that would be the advice that I have. My kids are distracting me.
Oh no, I love it. It's perfect timing. It's perfect timing. Everything we teach at My Health Yoga, everything that I talk about here at my work as well, is about creating a reality. This is why there's so many people who talk about vision boards and goal setting. It's if you want to look at the science, there's a science behind it. We've got incredible physicians, whether they work with metaphysics or biology, who talk about how to create your reality. And I think you also have to realize that anytime you're exposing yourself to a worst case scenario, that will always be embedded in your biology. It will be embedded in your body at a neuro level as a possible scenario. When you're in a state of trauma, when you're in a state of fear, your body will not select the files of bliss by default. It won't do it. I've been in states of fear and trauma myself. As soon as you have a little bit of fear, your body goes, well, that's it. Goes through the filing cabinet and says, hang on, where was that tiny little thing that I read that said this is the 0.001 chance it could happen? And your body blows it up and says, well, this is where you're going. Because that's how adrenaline works. Evolution has a little bit of a trick with that, in that, it has programmed us to be so scared, but we don't need to be. And so I absolutely love that, Lonnie. I think, shedding yourself, holding yourself in white light, creating that experience that is yours, and empowering yourself with vision of exactly how it's going to unfold. Any other tips, Lou, that you can give to someone in terms of tools that you think would be really important as they head towards their birthing journey? Yeah.
Definitely find your community. In this day and age, we have access to online communities as well. So put out into the universe the type of people that you want to connect with. Here on the Gold Coast, we have a brilliant home birth community that has, meetups once a month, so you can physically meet people, share stories, all those, especially for first-time mums. It's just, you're kind of you don't know where to look or whose advice to take. So find those like-minded women that will become your village, because, your journey postpartum is a whole nother conversation as well. So starting to set up your support systems even before you conceive, if you can. So, knowing that you have people you can depend on and who have, traveled similar paths, because that aspect of community and, the whole it takes a village to raise a child it's really lost in our Western world. And so many new mums are just so isolated. So it's doing the work to, make these communities, make a new friend, seek out those people that are on your wavelength, because it is so important to feel held, especially in that postpartum period as well.
Very well said, Louise. Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't know if you muted there, Greg, but I was going to add to that just a little bit. But now I forget what I was going to add.
If it comes through,
I think I remember. So first of all, fear is debilitating. So let's just, whenever the fears come up through pregnancy or before, like you said, let's look at it and figure out where it came from, because it's not coming from us. It's coming from something external again. So let's find out where it's coming from and then get rid of it and be gone with it and let it leave our body, our thoughts, and our, it's been imprinted on us from somewhere along the way. Let's get rid of it. I love, yes, the community and a village, and that goes into the postpartum mostly, because most of the pregnancy, you can talk with other women, but if they haven't had the experience yet either, right, it's a different connection you're having. But the postpartum part is where different cultures and stuff. Greg, you were, asking people maybe to share links and information about different birth practices culturally around the world. But I think you should look into postpartum cultural.
It's funny you say that, Lonnie, because I did a podcast. What day are we in now? It was last week. I did a podcast with Keone from Pahala Medicine in Hawaii. So he's a fern medicine practitioner. And he told me that in Hawaii, he was actually raised for the first 5 years by his grandmother or his grandparents. I can't remember grandparents or grandmother. And that was something traditionally done. And then you're gifted back to your parents at the age of 5. So it's actually your grandparents that raise you and teach you about culture and ceremonies and life and about the way of the land. And I thought, isn't that incredible? It's going to give your parents, a little bit of time to kind of get over the initial shock of birth. I'm not saying whether that's right or whether that's wrong. I just love that there's these different ways of postpartum postpartum success, postpartum experiences, situations in different cultures. I think it's beautiful, but I'm sure if we looked at other cultures, the common denominator would be that you're right. It takes a village. It's about community. It's about connection, and it's about connecting to your values from a very young age. What are your values? What makes us human? Is it, for me, I was lucky to have a mother who was really quite present. I was very close to my father, but he had to work. He was working. And, from a young age, my mum said I used to just stand at the steps in the morning and watch him leave to go to work and just cry. You can imagine for my poor mum, she's like, oh, mind you, I'm the one doing everything. He's off working. But, so everyone's story is different. But I think from that, what I learned is that whether or not you can remember it or not, there's so much imprinting that happens at a really young age. I'm looking at different research at the moment into mental health and teenagers and adolescents. And what happens is a lot of the time 0 to 6 and then 6 to 12 is when everything really is imprinted in our biology. And it becomes, you were mentioning before, Lonnie, our attachments, our securities, and our values and how they manifest when we're adults. So is there anything, as we head to close up the hour, is there anything that stands out at the moment that you think is imperative for someone to know? Is there an agenda? Is there something that's unfolding within the world that you think, hang on, I really want to make sure that women know this? Is there any one thing, or is there any couple of things that's important? Or is it a little bit more generalized? And is it a little bit more just keep doing what you're doing? Do you think that people are heading on the right track? Or do you think that this is something that's going to amp up a little bit more before there's a resolution?
I think one thing, especially right now, there's a new documentary just been released here in Australia and worldwide. It's called Birth Time, and it's been there's screenings all over, and highly recommend that everybody go and see this. It doesn't matter if you're not pregnant or don't even plan to have kids. Take your partners, take everyone. This documentary is amazing, and it centers a lot on what we've been talking about how women are, being kind of traumatized by the system, and women aren't being supported as they need to. And it's an amazing, inspiring documentary by a Australian midwife, and also it like follows different home birth stories and kind of shows the difference in woman-centered care. So yeah, I highly recommend that everyone
and it's
try
called,
and get to a screening of that.
Birth Time, did you say?
Yep, Birth Time. And the website's Birth Time World. And there's still screenings going on here on the Gold Coast and worldwide. And yeah, it's amazing.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And if you don't have, back to the, village thing or groups, finding groups and things, if there isn't an ongoing group in your community, just start your own. That's what I've done before. I've just put a call out to the community. Are you pregnant, or did you just have a baby? Like, come meet at my house, and I provide tea and stuff like that. So it is really important to get everybody just talking and sharing different stories, for sure. But the last thing that I would leave women is just to say, you're perfect. Like, there's nothing wrong with your body. You are not broken. You are born perfect. And you know what a blessing it is to be who you are and to be the woman you are, to be able to birth and grow a human being. It's a beautiful thing. So you got to ask why this is being taken away from us, because
yes,
the empowerment that comes with growing and birthing a baby take you through life. Like I said, it'll just give you life by giving life in a whole new way. And I'm sorry, men, that you can't experience it, but that's just the way that it is. And if I can mention, I do like a daily live series. I have a couple that I do, but one of them is birth stories. So I have a birth story series, and I have guests on who talk about birth, positive birth stories, and just lots of great information. So surround yourself with positive birth stories, positive documentaries like Louise had mentioned. And you can go to my Life and Birth Mentor YouTube channel to follow me there to see these guests. Just beautiful stuff going on over there. So thank you.
Yeah, amazing. We'll pop a link to that in the comments below. I had to giggle when you said that, Lonnie, because I was raised with my mum. She was very open, but I didn't particularly ask questions about what was going on at that time of the month. But my sister had some pretty hectic, it could have been endometriosis. This is, a good 30 years ago, so it probably wasn't diagnosed, but there was a lot of stuff going on. And all I knew was, you're so lucky to be a man that you don't have to put up with this. And I think shifting that mind frame a little bit into saying, well, we're both lucky as gendered people, male or female, we both have a role to play in the world, and creating harmony and balance is about embracing what your unique offering is to Gaia and what your unique offering is to the world. Whether or not you're going to birth children or not, you're still a perfect female, and you're still valued, and you're still an incredible person, just living your life exactly the way you're going to live. You can look around the world and be inspired by females, whether or not they have children or whether they don't. But I think, and this is a whole nother conversation, so I'm glad you kind of brought it up, Lonnie, and this will be for another podcast. At the end of the day, if we look at, I almost want to say just follow the money. If we look at where we're being told to go and the direction we're being told to go, does that align with what nourishes you and makes you feel whole and makes you feel happy and beautiful and alive? Or are we trying to be led, and we're no longer being led, we're actually being dragged, coerced, pushed and forced down a path, which is, it's not serving anyone's higher good. It's a path which leads to fear and control and manipulation. And as I said earlier, we're all humans that have been birthed. So if this is something which is going to be the norm, if birth is going to be traumatic, and if it's going to need a whole lot of, synthetic this and poison that and tests and everything else that happens, the big package of birth that's wrapped up in a shiny new hospital, if that's the norm, I wonder what would happen to the population in years to come. So it's so important that we have women like you, both of you, doing this work, because it's such, I don't want to say thankless work, because I know that the women who you work with would give so much gratitude to you, but it's work that you do not to become esteemed medical professionals. You don't do this because you've got to pay off your mansion and your new Jaguar or something like that. This is work that you do because you really care about yourself, and you care about karma, and you care about the planet, you care about our children. And that's where we're heading. So on behalf of everyone that's listening to this podcast, whether you've listened to us today or whether you've listened to this in the future, a huge thank you to you, Lonnie, a huge thank you to you, Lou, and anyone who's listening. If you are a doula, holistic birth coach, if you're a mum, if you're pregnant, if you're just listening and thinking, yeah, I love this and this resonates with me, thank you to you. And please do share this, tag anyone who you think will learn from this, because this is a message which we owe it to the world. We owe it to our children in the future. We owe it to the men as well. We owe it to ourselves to share this information and to remind ourselves that birth is not a medical emergency. Birth is a beautiful, transformative event, something which is to be celebrated. And again, it was my absolute pleasure to host this chat with both of you. We will pop links to YouTube and to anything else that we need to just below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook. We'll always pop the links below so you can learn more about. So we've got Louise Mackie, who is our, let's say, facilitator, but also she wrote the pregnancy and postpartum course for our teacher training here at My Health Yoga. And then Lonnie Gustafson do you have a business name, Lonnie, or do you work just under your own name?
Yeah, I know. I'm just here. People reach out.
Yeah, cool. I love that.
Organically, I guess. Yeah, I just
totally
do whatever God is leading me to do in the moment. So.
Perfect. But I've already seen, as I mentioned, after connecting with you on social media, I've already seen some of the incredible chats that you do. I just saw a video on your YouTube with one of our friends at My Health Podcast called Galactic Greg. So there's some really interesting chats there. So I'm sure if anyone wants to hear more from Lonnie, just pop her name into YouTube, because there's some really interesting stuff to be learnt. So I really appreciate both of you taking time out of your day, whether it's your afternoon for you, whether it's your evening for you, and joining us at My Health Podcast. Such beautiful chat, and I know that both of you will be friends of the podcast and on again in future episodes. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies, and thank you for watching, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you guys.
You too.